Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is none other than Bishop T.D. Jakes. Many of you know Bishop Jakes, but for those one or two people who don't, let me introduce you to him. T.D. Jakes is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of more than 40 books. He's also the CEO of TDJ Enterprises. His television ministry program, The Potter's Touch, is watched by 3.3 million viewers every week, and he has produced Grammy award-winning music as well as hit films like Heaven is for Real, Miracles from Heaven, and Jumping the Room. As you all well know, he's a master communicator, and he hosts MegaFest, Woman Thou Art Loosed, and other conferences that bring in tens of thousands of people. This morning, Bishop Jakes joins us to talk about his new book, simply entitled Soar, Build Your Vision from the Ground Up. Bishop Jakes, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. So for anybody who will read the book, Bishop Jakes, we can only imagine how many times and by how many people you have been asked, how did you do it and how do you do it? Was that the impetus for the book?
Well, to a degree it was. There's a couple of things. One, people watch me in my own entrepreneurial pursuits. They watch us produce $500 million worth of gross box office sales through our films and what have you. They watched us do some television products as well. The talk show where I was not only the talk show talent, but was also the producer on the show. And people said, we want to hear more about the entrepreneurial side of you. And I wanted to respond to that. Then when I look at the economy and I look at so many people that are dropping through the cracks of not being able to find a good job, went to school and sleeping on their mother's couch, can't get a job, can't get an apartment, women going to work, often having to become sole breadwinners in their homes, people who are incarcerated and can't get a job. Nobody will hire them. Nobody will give them a place to stay. Those kinds of problems I thought needed to be addressed. And I wrote Soar to inspire people in those categories and others that your dream is possible and you can build it from the ground up. You don't have to have a lot of financiers and a whole lot of money. You have to have a whole lot of grit and a whole lot of fight, but you can get it done.
Mm-hmm. And what I could feel in the book, Bishop Jakes, was I could feel your pull on trying to help people, because anybody who is an entrepreneur understands that those first few years are really critical and that most small businesses fail in those first few years. And you write about your dad dying at 48 years old, but before you talk about that, you talk about his hustle and how he really hovered, but he never really was able to soar. Talk about the importance of putting those things together.
Well, my dad, he went after everything. I mean, he worked really hard to feed the family. I get my work ethic from him, and I adore him. He did inspire me to the degree that he started a janitorial service with a mop and a bucket and ended up with 52 employees and about 10 trucks. Back in the 60s, that wasn't easy for a person of color to do. But I did notice that a lot of times my dad was out there working the jobs when he needed to be somewhere thinking through how he was going to move his brand and company to the next level. Fast forward today, I have people all around me who are physicians and trying to run the office, but they're so busy with the patients they can't really run the office or move the agenda of the clinic to the next level. I have people doing hair, and they're so busy doing hair they can't really grow the business to the next level. I have people who are CPAs trying to open up a third location, but they can't get away from the clients long enough to do it. And I'm saying to entrepreneurs that sometimes you do better to hire somebody to do what you used to do so that you have the freedom to really think through and lead by intellect rather than effort where you're going with your brand, with your business, whatever that business might be.
And so when you started to grow your ministry, did you kind of look at the fact that And I love what you write in the book. You say that entrepreneurialism is a family heirloom from your family because there were many entrepreneurs in your family. Did you sort of look at, as a young boy, when you watched your dad, what didn't go well and sort of make a turn on what you needed to be, not just to be a hard worker, but to build a business that wasn't solely surrounded, though you were the talent, but you had others to do those things so that you could grow into all of the things that you are establishing now?
I don't think that I really thought much about it at the time I was growing up. It's just now that I'm grown and I have my own church and I have my own for-profit business, and through my company I partner with business people, I look back at my dad and I see in retrospect that he may have worked himself to death. And it's probably as a grown man that I critiqued it more closely. It wasn't contrived, or it wasn't the catalyst through which I went about doing my task was to avoid the mistakes that he did. It was just that I stumbled into a higher level of consciousness, had opportunities because of him that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And because of those opportunities, I could kind of critique his methodology and say, hey, I want to do my life a little bit differently, and I want to be a little bit more strategic. I don't want to die with a buffer in my hand or anything else in my hand. I want to be effective enough that I can know when to move out of the way and really, truly, success. Good leadership works itself out of a job. And so, ultimately, I don't want to be affixed to something that I could assign to somebody and thereby run the organization more effectively.
Mm-hmm. And so you use the metaphor of almost a flight plan. Talk about why you went through the whole sort of ideology of, making the plan, from the ground up, and then really how to fly.
Well, the flight plan idea was a metaphor for having a business plan, and a lot of people go into business with no business plan. They just rent a place, go out and buy some materials and office supplies and paint a banner on the window, go for it. But then you don't last very long. You have to have a plan that strategizes, that includes the expectations of problems. We have to have a marketing budget and a strategy for that. Cost of goods and services and shipping and receiving and long-term expenses, startup expenses, as opposed to perennial expenses that come up every year. Those sorts of things to strategize. Without a strategy, you're almost planning to fail if you don't have a plan.
Absolutely. And so for those people that you're speaking to so many people that I'm sure want to start their business and are trying to figure it out. And you really talk about understanding the market and understanding what you need in order to create a successful business. One of the examples you used was, being able to make a good pound cake, but not really being able to have all of the other ancillary things around that to make that business grow. Talk about why it's important.
There's a lot of difference between doing things as a hobby that you enjoy doing and doing it as a business. And a lot of times people get they turn their hobby into a business, and that's a great thing, but you can't handle it like you did when it was a hobby. There are other factors involved. There's regulations and standards and things like that have to be considered. There's marketing and production and shipping and receiving and a lot of things that should take you out of the kitchen if it were a bakery, or may take you away from the drafting board if you're an architect. It's a real job to start a business. I mean, that is really a true job, and you may need somebody to do the business so that you can run the business is one of the things that I'm suggesting.
Absolutely. Let me get a quick break here, Bishop Jakes, but when we come back, we'll talk more about SOAR. Build your vision from the ground up. Stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is none other than Bishop Jakes. His new book is entitled Soar, Build Your Vision from the Ground Up. Bishop Jakes, you've been giving a lot of scenarios, and I know over the years you've learned a lot of things, but people who are just starting out, how did you begin to build your business and understand the nuances that would encourage your business to grow and keep you from just hovering? Was there a person that mentored you? How did you begin to learn what it would take not only to grow your ministry, but to grow into other things that ultimately came from that?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, it might really surprise you to know that my for-profit company is older than the Potter's House.
Wow.
So one didn't come out of the other. But the interesting thing is, in developing a business, I started reading everything I could read, listening at everybody I could listen to who had ever done anything like that. When I started the enterprise, it was in West Virginia. And to be honest, I wasn't exactly sure what the business was going to be. We were doing plays that traveled around the country, and then the plays turned into movies, and the movies turned into a deal with Sony Pictures, and we started producing films and various things like that. But initially, when I started the business, it was not my intent to produce movies because the opportunity had not presented itself yet. So even though you set a plan in motion and you start a business, there has to be enough liquidity in the business to find out what works and to change what doesn't work. If you're not flexible, you won't survive. And to move from one idiom of thought to the other. Arming yourself with the kinds of information that goes along with business is important. And also putting yourself in an environment where you socialize with people who are doing what you do because they get you. A lot of times we don't really hang out with people that are going where we're trying to go, or even serve them. If you can come in a place of service, even giving service can be the catalyst to great opportunities to further and deepen your relationship with them. You can't start out in the pit house. You have to start out, get in where you fit in, and eavesdrop and learn and listen and ask questions. And grow. One of the greatest things somebody can give you is information.
Indeed. One of the things that you write about in the book that I thought was so powerful, you talked about why you left West Virginia, and you talked about really people trying to put you in their box, and that there was an incarceration, almost like people wanted to incarcerate your ideas and your growth. How big was it to leave West Virginia where people really couldn't celebrate you, couldn't understand this lofty vision that you had?
It was very difficult to leave because I'm a very loyal person. And, I've been married to one woman for 35 years. I've been in the ministry for 41 years. I've only lived, this is the second city I've ever lived in my life. I've had 2 pastors in 60 years of my life.
Wow.
I'm a very loyal person, so leaving doesn't come easy for me, and that's a good thing. But it became necessary. Sometimes you can be loyal to a fault, and it became necessary for what I was trying to launch in my life and what I felt my call was and my destiny was. I would never be able to do it there. One of the great stories that we share in the book that I really love is that when the Wright brothers got the idea to build a plane, it was in Dayton, Ohio.
Right.
And they started the preliminary work in Dayton, Ohio, and did all of the work in Dayton. But when they got ready to actually take flight, they had to go to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. And they went to Kitty Hawk in part because the winds were right. And for what I was trying to do, the winds were not right in where I started. And you don't always have to launch where you start. Don't be afraid to go into new areas. And for me, it was moving from Charleston to Dallas. And I say don't be afraid, but I was afraid. I guess I should have said.
I was going to ask you that. I mean, you had lived there your whole life. Did that still small voice say to you, Dallas, it's Dallas? How did that happen?
Well, yes, I felt like it was Dallas, but I'm going to tell you the thing that was most difficult about leaving Charleston is I moved my mother with me, and my mother came too. And there's something about uprooting your mother that's kind of scary
Right.
because I knew, if I was wrong, I would never hear the end of it.
What did
And
she say, Bishop Jakes, when you said, Mom, we're going to just leave everything we have here and we're going to go to a place that we really don't know that much about, and you're going to come with us? What did she say? What's that conversation like?
You never tell my mother what she's going to do. That conversation would have never went like that.
Okay,
But,
okay.
I told her, I would like for you to go. And my mother and I were very, very close.
Uh-huh.
And she decided that she wanted to go. And we packed her up. It was a bit traumatic because she had lived there most of her adult life and moved to Dallas, where there are millions of people in this city, and we weren't used to being in big cities and that sort of thing. See, what it's all about, what it all summarizes up to, often your destiny will take you way outside of your comfort zone. It not only do people incarcerate you, there's self-incarceration where we become comfortable to live behind the barriers of the familiar, even if the familiar is frustrating.
Wow.
And it comes to a point that you cannot allow your need to be in the familiar to allow you to spend the rest of your life in total frustration because you cannot build what you're trying to build there. It's I keep going back to this metaphor, but it fascinates me so. The bicycle shop wasn't as big as the plane. And it comes a point that an idea has outgrown where it originated. And that's why babies break out of wombs. I mean, I'm too big for where I started.
Right.
And when that happens, the Bible says enlarge your cords and strengthen your stakes. You have to find a way to break out of these incarcerating environments so that you can maximize your potentials and be all that God would have you to be and that you feel that you were destined to be.
Right. But isn't that the hardest thing, though, for most people, Bishop Jakes? And I'm sure, you preach many sermons, and we know what the word says, that a man's gifts or woman's gifts and talents will make room for them. And we all know that. But there are so few people, and I was so cognizant of that as I was reading the book, that have great talent and great potential, but are not able to break free from that incarceration to really be an asset to what they were created in the world or in their community to be and do.
You're absolutely right. But the thing about it, it's very hard, but nobody said it was going to be easy. It's very frightening. But this is not about your comfort. This is about your potential. And as soon as you give up your need to be comfortable, because really, faith operates in disruption. The peace be still message would have never come if there weren't a storm that preceded it.
Right.
So if we say, never put me in a storm, then we will never learn that he's a master of the storm. And so a lot of those things occur so that you can be developed and so you can be stretched. It is not easy. It's not comfortable. It was scary. It was frightening. I stayed up at night many nights wondering, had I bit off more than I could chew because this new terrain, I had no historical data, no point of reference to back it up. But there's something funny, and I hope you can get this at your readers, that I can articulate it in a way that it makes sense. The adrenaline that you get when you are out of your comfort zone is so intoxicatingly exciting that once you do it and win, you will always want that feeling again. You will never be happy to play it safe again, because playing it safe becomes so boring and so monotonous that you want to, the analogy that I use is that the eagle stirs its nest and evicts all of the eaglets out of the nest by tossing them to the wind where they feel like that they're going to die. But as they are falling down to the ground and flailing and kicking, they find their wings. And that's the exciting thing about being challenged you find your wings, albeit you may be sweaty and a little bit scared. You find out who you really are when you leave the comfort of these nest situations that we get in that are comfortable and meet you at the point of your need, but do not really challenge you to discover why you are on this planet.
Indeed. Let me get a quick break here, Bishop Jakes, but when we come back, we're going to talk more about SOAR, Build Your Vision from the Ground Up. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. It is our great pleasure, and we know it's yours as well, to have Bishop T.D. Jakes on our program this morning talking about his new book, SOAR. And Bishop Jakes, one of the reasons why we wake up early and we do the shows and we read the books like yours is so that we can begin to empower people. People look at you. And every time you've come on the show, I've said this to you. People look at your life. They look at the successes. They look at the New York Times bestsellers, you know, all of the amazing things that you're doing, tens and thousands of women coming to MegaFest and the movies and the Grammys, and they forget that you started with just humble beginnings, and that, you know, you didn't do it, as you said, because it was easy. You really did it because it was hard. How do you make that impartation to all of those people who are filled and destined to be great?
You know, you are so right in what you said, and what I went through early on so defines me to a degree that often it took me a long time to really embrace who I have become, because I was so cognizant of where I came from. And I think all of us have those competing dualities that exist in our lives, where you know you bypass all the china and the crystal and start drinking iced tea out of a mason jar and yearn for your grandmother's back porch where you could spit watermelon seeds over the banister. You know, I came from that. I came from 7 members in a storefront and working a job and putting my money into the church to keep the church doors open. I came from that to losing the job and unemployment, and then no unemployment, and unemployment runs out, and then WIC and welfare, and trying to find my way through the storm. And
but you know what? When you say that, Bishop Jakes, people really don't believe that, because they just see where you are now.
Well, that's not the sort of thing you would make up, especially being as big a figure as I am, who have so many people who remember me from those days. They don't have to believe it. There are too many people who knew me in Charleston, West Virginia, who saw us struggle and saw us emerge. And it's where struggling was normal, I might add. It didn't even seem bad, because everybody was struggling. It was the order of the day. But, you know, I never have to prove that, because there's too many witnesses alive to validate that. And I think it also has something to do with my call to reach people that are suffering, because I really connect with them in a way that most people who have reached this level of notoriety, whatever level that might be, can't relate to people who are trying to budget a checkbook or trying to figure out, can I afford cable this month? You know, I came from those kinds of beginnings, and I want to say to someone who is going through that now, or going through a divorce, or you just lost your job, or you've lost a child, or your daughter's pregnant, or something traumatic has happened in your life, this is not the last chapter. You can reimagine yourself and get back up on your feet again. I often say you'll win if you don't quit. And so my core message to people is keep fighting and keep getting back up again, and never allow where you are to impede where you're going. You do have the power within yourself to overcome the circumstances around you. Boats don't sink because of the water around them. They only go down when the water gets in them. Keep the water out of the boat, keep it moving.
And for you, Bishop Jakes, one of the things that you write in the book is, you said doors open for you that you never thought possible. Talk about some of those doors that you never could even have imagined that opened for you in your life.
You know, I mean, let's go back a ways. The first time I had Vicky Winans to sing on my platform, I mean, people knew who the Winans were long before they knew who the Jakes were at all.
Wow.
To get to see some of the great gospel legends like Shirley Caesar end up singing at my church. You know, I can remember carrying her around. I can remember carrying around her album and trying to figure out how to play the chords to her album. And, you know, those kinds of things, to going to the White House and appearing at the White House and working with presidents and all of that sort of thing is inconceivable. It was just inconceivable what happened along the way. To have gotten to work with Oprah on several different projects in several different ways, it wasn't even something that you would even think to ask for. It was too ridiculous to mention. But life is funny. No one knows for sure what God has in store for you. The one thing that I do know for sure, and that I really try to stand by, is the Bible says, whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. And what I get out of that is, God can't prosper what you won't do. He can't prosper what you wish. He can't prosper what you hope for. The Bible said, whatsoever he doeth, that shall he prosper. And so you'll never know who you are or what you can be or what you can have or what you can accomplish if you just sit on the couch giving yourself reasons why you can't get up. He told a withered man, this withered man with the withered hand, to stretch forth his hand. He told him to do something he couldn't do. You know, he told a man sitting on palsy, pick up the bed and walk. He told him to do something that he thought he couldn't do. And so until you start doing things that you think you can't do, you'll never find out what you really can do. That's at the core of the book. It's not done in preaching language, but that's at the core and the substratum of the book, that to tell you to break the rule. So what, you're the first entrepreneur in your family. Break the rule. You may be the first one to go to college. Break the rule.
Right.
You don't have to be imprisoned by your zip code. And I'm passionate about it because I think that I grew up in a home where I had the benefit of having somebody say that in my ear. Not everybody grows up in that environment. So whether I can get it to you in a book or get it to you in a message or get it to you in a movie, I believe that eagles were made to soar and chickens were made to roost. And they can never commingle together. One final thing, the thing that I love about eagles is that eagles make love in the air.
Do they?
So it's impossible for them to mix with chickens.
Oh, wow. Who knew? Bishop Jakes, this is, you know, as I was reading the book, I said for everybody who has ever wondered how you did and are doing what you're doing, it's really a roadmap. And if we are smart enough to just pick up the book and read it, not just read it, but do the work, I think many more of us will begin to soar. Bishop Jakes, it is always, always a great pleasure. We are mindful about how busy you are and how many things that you have going. And so we thank you so very much for taking the time to share this incredible message with our listeners and our viewers. Before you've got to go, tell people how they can get SOAR and most importantly, how they can connect with all of the amazing resources that you have available.
Well, the great thing about the book is called Soar, and you can get it wherever books are sold. October the 10th is our street date in the stores, and anytime after that, it should be available literally anywhere. It also has a workbook, and it's also available in Spanish, so that's a good thing to know as well.
Absolutely.
All of our products can be found either through tdjakes.org for the not-for-profit or tdjakes.com for the films and the for-profit initiatives that we do are always available to you that way. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and giving voice to the message that's in the book. I pray that it really blesses somebody and touches their life in a real way. At this point in my life, you don't really do things for profit. You really do things for purpose. And it's my purpose to help other people find theirs.
Indeed. Bishop Jakes, we thank God for him using you as a light in the world, and we really need light in today's world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Glenda Stock, and this is our final point today on Point.
Glenda, we are so excited to have Bishop T.D.
What a
Jakes,
gentleman, huh?
Indeed, on point. His new book, Soar, Build Your Vision from the Ground Up. And we just can't thank Bishop Jakes' team enough for reaching out to us.
Absolutely. He
his new
is
book.
just a gentle giant. You know, I mean, you listen to him and the humility is just so real. You know, he still does not even know who he is. You know, when you think of his greatness and
Yes.
all that he has done, and he's just a major, major force to be reckoned with.
And I'm just so honored that he has connected with our show on so
Indeed.
many times, not only he, but his daughters and his wife.
Right.
And it just gives us great pleasure to be able to conversate with him, first of
yeah.
all.
Oh,
But with the book Soar, it's so important because, as I pointed out to Bishop Jakes, if we could all have the opportunity to just sit and talk with him, which we know he's so busy, but he always is so gracious with his time when it comes to us. But he really gives a complete breakdown about how he came into business, how he grew his business, and what people really need to know. And I know that this is totally your wheelhouse.
Well, you know, it's always interesting for me to hear a perspective of someone like him. Because, you know, your ears perk up when you hear these commonalities, you know, and you hear those things that you know were so true in your own story, you know, and you yourself we can identify with that. But I love his passion for making the message quite clear. That at some point, and this happens, I think, to so many young businesses, at some point, if you really want your business to grow, you've got to be willing to stop doing the day-to-day hands-on work and hire the people, invest and hire the people that can do those things, allowing you to do the strategic things to propel the business forward. And I remember it happening with myself. I was in Brewton, Alabama with my first store, and I was working from open to close and everything that was in between, and trying to be, you know, the manager, the supervisor, the everything to this store, and was just reaching really a point of breaking because I was trying to do too much.
Right.
And found myself becoming miserable in what just a few short months before I had loved, you know? And I suddenly realized, you know, when I started looking at the need, and I had this sweet little frontline manager one day come to me. Her name was Kim, and little Kim from Alabama. Miss Glenda, you're just going to have to break down and get yourself some help. You know? And she was so right. But, you know, in your mind as a business, you're thinking, I can't afford that. You know, we're new, and we're up and starting, and expenses, and you just can't afford it. And his statement rings so true in his book. You can't afford not to.
Absolutely.
You can't afford not to if you want to sustain and grow.
Right. And you could really mistake the title Soar for something else, but really he gives a total breakdown. And I love the example that he uses about his dad. And it's just what you're talking about. His dad had a business, but his dad died very early in life at 48 years old. And he said he didn't think it was really due to health issues. It was because he really worked himself to death. And he talks about how in the Potter's House business, the ministry, but the business, how he employs more than 300 people, and that he had to increase and grow in order to not just hover, but to soar.
Right.
And that's what so many businesses, I think we all, especially new businesses, we start hovering, and we are trying to soar, but are trying to put the pieces together, and he really helps us to be able to do that?
Well, and his message is so clear and worth listening to, that if we want to stay in that safe zone,
Right.
and feel, comfortable, chances are we can stay comfortable, but we're not going to soar. We're not going to reach the next level of growth or change, or perhaps putting ourselves into a realm that we really never thought we could be in. And it's so very true. His other headline for me in his book, which I thought was incredibly powerful as a coach to young entrepreneurs, is to talk about how important the word net is in networking. And we've heard the buzzword network, and it is important. And without it, you will fail. Without it, you will fail. You must seek the wisdom, the advice, the counsel, and the guidance of so many others. But in the course of doing that, to make certain along the way that you have developed those relationships with people who are experts in their field, but they also know how to catch you when you're falling. They also know how to catch you. And I just think that is a powerful message that most of us can really identify with if we've walked through a tough journey to be wherever we are in our life. And so many have done so, so many have done so. But I find Brother Jakes just an inspiration, because I think that he speaks so genuinely from his heart. And his book is put together in such a way that for startup businesses, or for businesses that have been around a while that might find themselves struggling,
Hovering.
a great read, because he really helps you to identify where you are and what you might need to be thinking about doing to get to another level.
Absolutely. And for those people who are thinking about going into business, he gives you so many things to think about. Just because you have a skill set doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to cross you over into business and that business will be successful. And he gives you all sorts of logistics to look at. And he calls it like a flight plan. It's a metaphor for the business plan, but absolutely everything that you need to know, anything that you probably would have asked him if you got an opportunity to talk to him, he really talks about. And what I love, Glenda, is he is so learned. He's not necessarily educated in all of these things that he's doing, but he said, I pick up everything I can and I read it. He's a movie producer. He has the Potter's House. He's won Grammy Awards for music. Any realm of business that you can think about in the entertainment industry, he has had a hand in. And you know that he didn't necessarily know how to do that.
No.
But he is doing the work.
Right. And he does that and is able to do that because he grasped that vision that there were others around him that he could learn from and that could support him in levels of business, but he had, and he makes a point of saying this, and I think it's worthwhile to repeat it. He had a plan, and that's sometimes is the demise of so many, is without some form of plan.
Right.
And he uses the analogy in the Bible where, God told the man who was crippled to take up his bed and walk. And he was basically commanding the gentleman to do something that he really didn't know how to do. And, get out of your comfort zone and you'll find your wings. And you'll find your wings.
And you will find your wings to soar. The book is called Soar. Bishop T.D. Jakes, Build Your Vision from the Ground Up. We're out of time for now. I'm Carlette Christmas.
And I'm Glenda Stock. And this has been our final point today on Point.
Stay with us, everybody. We're back right after this.